The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. When Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of King Herod, behold, Magi from the east arrived in Jerusalem, saying, "Where is the newborn King of the Jews? We saw his star at its rising and have come to do him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was greatly troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. Assembling all the chief priests and the scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. They said to him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for thus it has been written through the prophet, 'And you, Bethlehem, land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, since from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel.'" Then Herod called the Magi secretly and ascertained from them the time of the star's appearance. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search diligently for the child. When you have found him, bring me word that I too may go and do him homage." After their audience with the king, they set out. And behold, the star that they had seen at its rising preceded them until it came and stopped over the place where the child was. They were overjoyed at seeing the star, and on entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother. They prostrated themselves and did him homage. Then they opened their treasures and offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed for their country by another way. The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Well, Merry Christmas. Happy Epiphany. Happy Epiphany. Thank you. Yeah, this is the Feast of Epiphany, actually Solemnity of Epiphany. In terms of days in the church, this ranks as high as a day can get. The Solemnity of Epiphany ranks right up there with Christmas, with Easter, with Pentecost. It's just as important when we celebrate this day that Christ is shown forth, made manifest. He's an epiphany to the world, that he is King of all peoples, not just of the Jewish people. That the foreign Magi who come to him, they are his king as well, which is good news for all of us who are probably foreigners as well, but for whom Jesus is shown forth today as king. Solemnity of the Epiphany. Just on Friday, I was in the gym having a session with my trainer, and we got talking about Christmas and all that. And I told him that as we as a church, as a people of faith, that we do not keep Christmas the same way that our culture does. Whereas our culture basically keeps Christmas from, Black Friday to December 25. We start Christmas on December 25 and go through to today, this weekend, the Solemnity of the Epiphany. And he said, "Epiphany? What's that?" You don't give me an opening like that. And I was like, "Really? You don't know the story of the Epiphany?" He's like, "No, I've never heard of it." I said, "The three kings?" "No." I said, "It's a feast day that's greater in some countries than Christmas is here." "Really?" "Yes, you've seriously never heard the story of the three kings." I said to him, "You know the manger set?" "Yes." I said, "Baby Jesus, Mary and Joseph." Jerry and Moseph, yes, exactly. He's like, "Yeah," I go, "and there were like shepherds and then three kings?" He's like, "I'll take your word for that." Like, "Well, I've got an hour with you. Let me tell you some stuff." And so I shared with him the story from Matthew that we just heard today. And since there was lots of time left over, I then started to unpack it for him, as I would, explaining to him things that I've shared with all you guys before about how astrology was a no-no for God's people, but God met the Magi where they were at, with wherever they were, and so he spoke to them through nature, and that's not a surprise. How many people encounter God in nature? Whether it's the vastness of the sea or the beauties of the mountains, or in this case, the stars that spoke to them. So they had an experience of God, and they set out to find that. But interestingly, if you note in this story, the star does not get them to Jesus. It takes them to the wrong place. It takes them to Jerusalem. And why is that? Because while you may connect with God in nature, only through the scriptures do you find Christ. You may say nature is my church, but you're not going to get Jesus there. You got to go through the scriptures. So then once they get the scriptures, the star then knows where to go and takes them on to Bethlehem. And they get there and they present their gifts to him of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Gold, which is the royal metal fit for a king, telling us that Jesus is a king. Frankincense, used in the worship of God, telling us that Jesus is God. And then myrrh, which is used at that time for embalming. So already Matthew's anticipating the death of the Savior. And yes, well, there were 3 gifts. We really don't know how many magi there were because Matthew never tells us. We assume there were 3. There could have been 2. There could have been 100. We just don't know. But then ultimately, what the day really means is that Jesus is for everyone. He's not just Savior of the Jewish people, but for everybody. And I even managed to work in my conversation with him that thing from C.S. Lewis that I had said in my Christmas homily 2 weeks ago about how Christianity, if it's false, is of no importance, but if it's true, is of ultimate importance. The only thing it can't be is moderately important. And I got all done, and he stood there blinking and said, "Wow, that's amazing. Thank you." And I just smiled, realizing he was having an epiphany about Epiphany. There are, I hope, for most people, if not for all of us, 2 different types of epiphanies. The first is what we celebrate today, this solemnity that reveals to us that Jesus is for all people, including us, that he is shown forth as a light for all nations, that what we heard in the very first reading on the first Sunday of Advent from Isaiah, that the mountain of the Lord's house will become the mountain for all people, comes to fulfillment, that the Magi are in the vanguard of all of us who eventually seek Christ. And so we keep that epiphany, that Jesus is for all peoples. But then hopefully there's that second epiphany as well that we all experience, which is the epiphany in which maybe we as a community, or you or I as individuals, have that moment, or maybe moments, in which we realize that Jesus is Emmanuel, that God is with us today in powerful, life-changing ways. I'm not talking about just getting more knowledge and more information about God or about Jesus. I'm talking about those aha moments in which your faith leaps to life and hopefully changes your heart, changes your understanding of God, and changes how you live in the world. And I realized as I was putting this together that if I was going to talk about that, I would probably need to share an aha epiphany from my own life. And I really think, the first one I could think of was the summer after I graduated from college from UC Davis. That summer, I went off with an organization called Youth with a Mission to Scotland to do some missionary work. How I ended up doing that is a whole nother story that maybe someday I'll tell you. But I was excited to go to Scotland because faith had always been part of my life. I'd always been a practicing Catholic, I think mostly for the social reasons more than anything else. Even in college, I continued to go to the Newman Center and had a good time there. But I went with YWAM, Youth with a Mission, to Scotland because I was going to get to do evangelical street theater at the Edinburgh Arts Festival. I was going to get to perform at the Arts Festival. How fantastic was that going to be? Which to me was wonderful. It wasn't like I was going to have to do missionary work like go door to door. Hello, do you believe in Jesus? Not that. I was going to get to perform, and I've always done theater all my life, in a way that people could either walk by or stop and watch if they chose to. Fantastic. So I got to Scotland. They gave us 3 days of training. There were about 100 of us. They broke us into 4 teams. 2 of the teams went to the Edinburgh Arts Festival. My team did not. My team was sent to Glasgow, which at the time was a very depressed city, and we worked in a suburb called Annisland, which was particularly depressed. And the work we did was to go door to door. Hard. Really hard. I had never done anything like that before in my life. And the area was a dangerous area. We would go to tenement houses where windows were broken and boarded up and graffiti, and it had the smell of things that you wouldn't want to smell in places you're living. I remember one day they dropped us off, and as they dropped myself and my partner off to work our way through this building, they said, now be careful in there, someone was murdered in there last night. Okay. But it was that day that when we knocked on a door, it sort of slid open, and we saw a man on the ground surrounded by drug paraphernalia, and we were able to call and get him help and save his life. It was that sort of thing every day. I was sleeping on the hard floor of the church that we were working with. And in the evening, we would open the basement of the church so that runaway children and the homeless and drug addicts could come in and get out of the foggy, cold Scottish nights and have a cup of warm tea and a sandwich. It was extraordinarily challenging for me. Hard. But I had that sense of this is really an important thing to do and really right to do. The epiphany was this. God had to pick me up out of my very comfortable and safe East Bay living situation and drop me in a place where I didn't know anybody, where I was just uncomfortable and thrown off enough that the only thing I had to rely on was my Christian faith. And what happened was I learned, I experienced that God is faithful. Not just words, but truly, truly is in those unexpected, difficult, off-balance moments of life. See, what happened was the faith that my parents had tried to instill in me in years, the faith that my catechists tried to teach me for decades, the faith that the priests I had when I was growing up as a kid tried to show me, that foundation that I had suddenly flared to life. It suddenly all became real. It made the move from here to here and changed my life and me dramatically. Dramatically. I realized this morning, I think it was sort of like the Magi. I had to go to another country to really encounter Jesus, to really find him. That's how it worked for me, that epiphany. I have to admit, looking back now, I might not have said in those first years of my life that my parents or my catechists or my priests were an epiphany of God. But sure enough, they were. Sure enough, they were. Often in hindsight, you can see, aha, that's what God was doing in my life. And if you look around, epiphanies continue to happen to tell us every day that God is with us. As I've said before, a faith without epiphanies is just dead. Hopefully you've had aha moments in your life, but if not, you can find them. Anybody here married? I hope so. Are you married? Let's figure out who's been married the longest. Who here has been married 20 or more years? Awesome, that's great. 30 or more years? Looking good. 40 or more years? 50 or more years? All right, here we go, a couple left. How long? 58. 58. 56. 50. 55? 52. 61. Going once, 61 going twice. How long? 62, you got trumped. 62, anybody else? Yes. 53, thank you. Look around. All these examples that show us that love can triumph in a society that tells you can easily throw things away. All these magnificent examples of people who for 50, 60 years have somehow managed to be faithful, have loved through good and through bad, through the hard times, through the problems. Epiphanies of what God's love like us is for. Or you can see it when estranged family members make the effort to heal the division. Or when friends find the strength to forgive and to be forgiven. Or you can see it in the massive amount of people who work behind the scenes for justice causes to make sure that there's clean water for everyone in the world, or to bring aid to those who are in war-torn areas, to end slavery, or even, if you have the eyes to see it, our very own giving tree, which gets bigger and more massive every year as you graciously and generously reach out to help people you don't know and have never met. Yes, it doesn't always happen. The human spirit can be very stubborn. But when it breaks through, it's an epiphany that God is present to us. This isn't just a feast day today. It's how we're called to live. Maybe as we leave this Christmas season, 2 questions that you can carry with you and reflect on this week. The first was inspired for me by a quote from Max Lucado. You may know Max Lucado. He's not Catholic, but he's a Christian writer, and he says a whole lot of really stunning and beautiful things. But as I was reading for Epiphany, I found this from him. He says, God rewards those who seek him, not those who seek doctrine or religion or systems or creed. Many settle for these lesser passions. But the reward goes to those who settle for nothing less than Jesus himself. And what is the reward? What awaits those who seek Jesus? Nothing short of the very heart of Jesus. God rewards those who seek him. How seriously do you seek him? Really, how seriously? I was struck by Matthew's story that there are scribes and Pharisees who have all the knowledge. Where's Christ going to be born? Oh, in Bethlehem of Judea. That's what Micah tells us. But they did nothing with that knowledge. They stayed at home while someone else went hunting. How seriously do you seek him? And while I'm thinking of it, a side note, parents, catechists, grandparents, never stop sharing your faith, gently, lovingly, kindly, with those whose souls you tend to. One of the reasons I don't quit is because of my experience in Scotland. You never know when what you are planting in others will come to life. One plants the seed, another waters. God will cause the growth. Never despair. How seriously do you seek him? And the second question, how are you an epiphany of God for others? How are you in your love, in your care, in your graciousness, in your compassion, in your mercy, evidence of God with us? How do you show forth his light? How are you an epiphany? As I say, it's not just a feast we give today. It's the way we are called to live every day.